someone. And beautifully, this concept that we are talking about out here is a concept that was actually crowdsourced with about 430 odd people who came together to put together the concepts that ultimately resulted in two books. The first book is known as the Business Model Generation, and the second book is known as the Value Proposition Design. I highly recommend both of these books to any of you, which are both the lead author for these books is Alexander Osterwalder, and his website is strategizer.com. Take a picture of this, keep it there, go back to Amazon or whichever other book service provider that you get your copies from. Do buy it. I don't earn anything from it, but I definitely recommend these books because these are great sources of information for the tools that we are going to talk about today. So that's the starting point for us. Let's go on and try to understand when we talk about the concept of the business model canvas, what is it that we are talking about? We have to obviously start with a definition. And before I go to the definition, can any of you put down in chat message, what do you think is a business model canvas? Quickly, let's see some quick, crisp, 4 or 5 words kind of statements that indicate to me and tell me what do you think is the business model canvas. Can we? I'm having my chat window open, so I'll be able to see as you put in your chats. It also lets me know who's awake and who's sleeping. Okay, Ali said blueprint of business. Nancy says 360-degree view of your idea. Kritika says SWOT analysis. George says master visual doc on business strategy. Wonderful. That's a great description, George. Fatima says a quick view of model of your business and what problem you're solving. Wonderful, Fatima. You're pretty much on the dot. Bastian says, I would guess it's a conceptual model that tries to grasp key business components. That's right. Mithat says language of describing of business model. Wonderful. Resources match to your goals. That's what Bharat has said. Great. So I think you're not too much off the park. Nobody is really talking about the business model canvas as the best way that you can ensure that you can get a lovely spouse, or how is it that you can ensure that you can get to the moon. But definitely, as far as the business is concerned, it's a great starting point. And a lot of the stuff that most of you have written down, a quick view, an overview, an understanding of what problem you're solving, I think all of those fundamental elements are rightly covered in the business model canvas definition. So let's look at the definition. There's a lovely quote that really starts off with Joan Margareta. Why do the business models matter? Ultimately, a lot of you might have attended Pradeep's session, and when he was talking about the pitch deck, I loved the way that he talked about the fact that a pitch deck should be like a story. And the same way, the business model canvas, ultimately, the business models are at heart stories. They are the stories that really explain how businesses work. And that is the beauty of the canvas, right? It allows you to view a story that is able to articulate how does your business really work, how does the enterprise work. Now we also look at another very famous luminary in the management lexicon who is known as Peter Drucker. Age-old questions that he asks in a lot of the content that he talks about. Who is your customer and what does the customer value? This is at the centerpiece of what a good business model canvas is. Clarity of thought in terms of who your customer is and what is it that the customer values. When you get a clarity upon these two concepts, it's so much more easier for you to proceed upon the rest of the stuff. And then going on, other fundamental questions that you really look upon is, how do we make money in this business? And what are the underlying economic logic that explains that how do we deliver value to a customer at appropriate cost? So really speaking, business model canvas gives you an overview of your customer, the problem that you're solving, the value that you're delivering to the customer, how is it that you're making money, how is it that you're delivering value to your customer. All of these things really come together. And beyond that, it becomes a diagram that really shows the flows between the company and its customers. It describes the rationale of how the organization creates, delivers, and captures value. And the beauty of everything, it's all on a single sheet of paper. A lot of documents or a lot of pitch decks might have multiple pages, multiple sheets, multiple things that you need to understand. How are this connected to the other here and there? But the beauty of the business model canvas, it all comes down to a single sheet of paper. So basically, it covers all the parts of the company necessary to make money. This is the way that you have to understand the business model canvas. Now, when you start talking about the business model canvas, I like to ask this kind of a question to people who have experienced the canvas before this. How many components are there to a business model canvas? Any of you attempted a canvas earlier, or you tried your hand at it? Can you put in a chat message? Okay, Pooja is fast off the block, Rajesh is off the block, Nancy is also answered. We see a lot of number nines. Nines will be a lucky number, a lot of people looks like. Wonderful. Anybody wants to bet on some other number besides 9? Or do we have only 9 out here today? Okay, wow. So consistent. Everybody seems to be, yes. 9 plus 2 externalities. Nice, Nancy. That's pretty interesting. Wonderful. Okay, good. We've at least moved from ahead from a number 9. Anybody else with any other number? You don't want to place your bets on any other number, only number 9. That's the lucky number today. You're absolutely right, all of you all, that there are 9 building blocks to the business model canvas, and that is the core and essential part. And Nancy, you're right. There are also externalities to a business model canvas, but there are 4 externalities, not just 2. So you're not off the mark, but pretty much there. But at the core of the business model canvas are 9 building blocks that really form the foundation of when you really put together a business model canvas. In today's session, my attempt is to take you through a brief explanation of all the 9. The business model canvas is ultimately, even a full day workshop, even if you do, you'll still run out of steam in terms of trying to put the entire thing together in a great fashion. So obviously we are not going to be able to do complete justice to help you to understand all the components of the business model canvas in detail in this 45 minutes that we'll have a session, but I can at least give you an overview. It'll give you an understanding what are the 9 building blocks, how are they connected, and in what sequence that you go through. And this is also very important, because a lot of people, when they see the business model canvas, at the end I'll show the canvas. When you see the canvas, you start thinking from left to right. So you start thinking that, okay, I have to start from this part, then I keep progressing and I go like this. Interestingly, the business model canvas works in a slightly different way. And when I take you through the 9 building blocks today, I will take you through the sequence through which you have to approach the business model canvas. And that is a key part to your thinking process for your business model. And what would be the first building block, in anybody's opinion, for you to have a business plan or a business model for your business, right? What should be the first building block for this? Again, I'd love to see some comments. Value proposition, okay. George says customer, wonderful. Anybody else wants to have, what could be the first building block? We have people, somebody is betting on value proposition, somebody is betting on customer. Anybody else has value prop or customer? Okay. Fatima wants to lay her bets on both the things, okay. Business objective, Ali says. Rajesh says customer segment, wonderful. Pooja has gone to customer segment. Seems to be the odds are being stacked up for customer segment out here right now. Anybody else has any other thoughts on this? Customer segment, wonderful. Okay, value proposition seems to be nobody's betting on value proposition anymore suddenly. What problem do you solve? Why does your business exist? Okay, that's a good starting point. Is it a building block? Who do you solve the problem for? Could be an interesting question to ask. Customer needs is, yeah, somebody's commenting something. Okay, wonderful. So I see a lot of people, and a lot of people are, you're completely on the mark. And Leila and Alexander, like you said, what problem do you solve? Why does your business exist? The key question to ask yourself, who does your business exist for? And the customer segment is the starting point to the business model canvas. Actually, technically speaking, if you look at the business model canvas, you're actually starting at the right side at the end of that page when you really start the canvas, which is the customer segments. So the first thing that you really approach your business model canvas is a clarity about the customer segments that you're going to serve. Now, some of you have been exposed to a lean canvas also. It's a variant of the business model canvas, and the lean canvas starts off with these elements, right? Who's the customer? What is the problem that you're solving? Those elements. It's a derivative of the business model canvas. The business model canvas does not have the problem that you're solving, but it definitely has a definition of who's your customer. And when you really say customer, and this is a great starting point, I meet so many businesses, and just today evening I was sitting up with some other company where we were having this conversation where I asked them to do this exercise on the business model canvas, and they had multiple segments that they really have. A lot of these segments land up getting intermixed in their minds. Now I'm going to help you to start thinking of your customers beyond just the general segmentation that you start thinking about. Typically when you ask somebody to say what are the customer segments that you might have, somebody say, okay, we might have consumers, we might have small businesses, we might have enterprises, you might have banks. Those are the generic kind of discussions that you really have as customer segmentation. But I'm going to challenge you and put you out through a thought process to see, can you go beyond that? Can you start thinking of your customers and start creating customer personas? And to be able to create customer personas, you need to have clarity in terms of what are the psychographic and demographic element that really distinguish your customer. And no matter whether it's a business or whether it's an individual, right? There are psychographics and demographics for every kind of a customer. In a business, the psychographic could be, do they invest in technology? Do they invest in quality systems, right? Do they have posh policies? Whatever like that. So these are the elements that you could also have even in a corporate or even in business customers. So there are elements that you can really have, and we are going to really talk about ensuring that when you start looking at segments, how do you ensure that you create segments? Now, the elements that you try to create segments upon is that you start looking at your customers and start looking at what are the common needs that these set of customers might have, and can you bunch them together as a segment. The other thing that you can look at, are there common behaviors? Are there certain set of customers that have the same behaviors, or other attributes that you can really utilize to create customer segments? So rather than doing all of the other classical models of segmentation that otherwise are done, try to start looking at your customers. Can you do needs, behaviors, attributes? So this is one way to start thinking of customers. Now, I have some examples of pretty extreme customer segmentation, and I repeat what I said in the beginning, pretty extreme customer segmentation, but it still helps you to get a perspective that if you build segmentation, to what extent can you go? So I'm going to start off with a thought process that why do you do customer segments? The customer segments are done because as a business, you should have a clarity about which customer segments to ignore and which segments to serve. And this is a very critical decision that an organization has to make. A lot of businesses or startup founders are obviously loath to say, turn away a customer? My God, that is sacrilege. You can't do that. But my dear friends, sorry, it doesn't work like that. It is important that you start understanding that are there segments you should choose to ignore, and are there segments that you should serve. And that, the ability to say no, is a good starting point for your business. I see a question out here that's come from Pooja. Should we drill down to the persona of decision maker in the desired segment? Later on, when you're doing the process of sales or marketing, you can drill down to the persona, Pooja. In this stage of the customer segmentation, even if you just segment the category or the group, that is sufficient. The persona, if you're in a consumer business, yes, then do a persona. If you are in B2B kind of a business, then you don't have to make a decision maker's persona here right now. That is required when you're building your sales process. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, so it's very important as a business to be able to decide which segments you choose to ignore. And that is a tough decision which one has to make in life. And the earlier you make it, the better it will be. Otherwise, very soon what you find is that you are serving different customers, different segments, each have different problems. They are asking you different things. Somebody asks you, can you give it this feature? Somebody asks you, I want this addition. Somebody asks you, I want this pricing. And then you are trying to be everything to everybody. In the process, you are nothing to nobody. So it's very important that you figure out which to ignore and which to serve. And I'm going to give you some examples of extreme element where there are businesses that chose to focus on customer segments. The first example that I have is from the lovely country of Turkey, where in a very, very small town. Anybody from Turkey in the group out here? Anybody out here? Don't think so. Did we have applications, Pradeep, from that wonderful country? Don't think so?
Not yet.
Not yet, maybe. So maybe after this we might motivate some people from Turkey to apply. So from a very small town in Turkey called Hatay, there is a wood carver whose name is Ali Altun. And Ali Altun is a wonderful wood carver. He's a very talented wood carver. He does wonderful work. And just like anybody else, there are so many wood carvers all across the world. Now, Ali Altun, when he decided to focus on terms of his business, he said, okay, I can carve wood. I can do so many things that I can do and so many kind of customers. Now, he started focusing upon carving doors for churches and mosques. That's it. Now, one would say that carving doors for churches and mosques, how many churches and mosques would a country like Turkey have? How many would be in the adjoining area? Would he have enough market? Well, my dear friends, this hyper focus made him into an internationally sought after maker for doors. As of today, he has been supplying church and mosque doors to churches in Europe, in US, and across the world. He has a waiting list of 2 years for anybody who wants to place an order with him today for a door. It takes him 2 years because he hand carves them himself. But look at the beauty of it. Zero cost of marketing, nothing. Complete focus with everything else that he did, only doing doors for churches and mosques, and he's across the world. He gets free PR, and then he's the number one in that area, and then he's so successful. The world is his market right now. He doesn't have to be limiting himself to that geography, to the small town of Hatay, to the country of Turkey, to even some part of Europe, but globally, right? Within just one segment that he was able to do. I'm going to give you another example of an extreme segment. I have one more question out here. In some cases, the customer decision maker is different. How shall this impact the BMC? Good question, Kritika. You start off in the BMC by focusing on the customer segment, right? Again, like I mentioned for Puja, when you start talking about the sales processes that you do, that is where you distinguish in terms of the decision maker. When I'm talking about the customer segment, if you're talking about a company, right? The company you're trying to ensure that you create a persona for. You're not trying to create a persona of the individual in the company. That is the only difference that I'm trying to give out here. Okay, so I'm going to give you another example of another wonderful company that's based out of that used to be based out of the US. The company's name was CJ Advertising. So this particular company, now we all know in the US, personal injury law firms is a very, very profitable business, right? It's a very, very successful business in many sense of the terms. Maybe not loved by everybody, but definitely it's something that happens. So this is the company CJ Advertising that actually does advertising and marketing for personally injury law firms. But they could have chosen to provide advertising and marketing services to so many things. They could have gone to startups, they could have gone to enterprises, they could have gone to doctors, they could have gone to lawyers, right? So everything. Now, they obviously chose to go only after lawyers first, and not all lawyers again after that. Within the lawyer category, they chose to go after the lawyers who are only personal injury law firms. That's it. That's the second level of deeper segmentation that they did. The third level that they did, they said that we'll only operate in the cities where NFL teams are there. So which obviously automatically means that you set up a threshold that only above a certain size of a city you will be operating. Automatically they set that up. And now comes the last but the most interesting bit. In each city, they will only serve one customer. And they guarantee to that customer that we'll make you the number one personal injury law firm in your city. They guarantee that, and they only work with one client in one city. When they launch a new city, there is a waiting list of clients who want to sign them up because that is the success rate that they've experienced in other cities. It's an amazing kind of a now. You might say this is extreme. Yes, it is. Yes, NFL is National Football League. Absolutely right. Paul, thank you for sharing that. And there it is where it goes. In a business where they're on call center, they're doing advertising for these personal injury law firms, they're operating at a 76% gross margin, and then they exited the business successfully in 2018. It's an extreme form of segmentation, I agree, but what I'm trying to tell you is understand how can you really segment yourself and focus on a market which is a niche or a sliver. But if you make it large enough, it could be extremely profitable for you, and you can be the king of that space. That the same way that CJ was, right? That clients would be coming after them to take them on. They would never need to go out to sign clients. Clients would be waiting for them to be able to take them on. A third example of a German company now, and you'll have to tell me if any of the people from Germany recognize this company, Winterhalter. Anybody recognize this company? Have you dealt with this company in any context earlier? Okay, you know them, Bastian. Thank you. Right. So like rightly you all know, and you can see it out here that this company makes dishwashers. Now, when you're making, these are the large industrial kind of dishwashers that can be used for large volumes of dishes. Now, you could be doing this business, right? When you're doing dishwashers, they obviously ignored the consumer market, and they said we'll go after the B2B, the larger volume market. Now, even if you're doing that, you have so many options because you are doing large volume dishwasher equipment. You could be doing for hospitals, schools, hotels, companies, organizations, right? You could be doing all of that because the needs are pretty similar to each other. They have large volumes and stuff like that. Now they said, no, we will not go after any of the other segments. It's only hotels and restaurants that we'll go after. And obviously, in terms of how there would be a certain cutoff point beyond which a restaurant would qualify, but most of the hotels would qualify. I see a quick question that I'll answer. Soumya says, what if your market size is small? Would you not have to integrate verticals? Would be number one still matter? Well, I have said this answer earlier also. Soumya, it depends upon what your ambition is. A lot of markets are large enough. Obviously, I would not say go after such a small market that you don't have a large enough market size. First of all, define that. But once you decide to go deep into that, there are enough examples of companies that have gone so deep and globally are number one in that segment. And Winterhalter is just one example of that. If they focused on only the German market, it would have been a very small market. If they focused maybe European market, large market. But Winterhalter is there, including in India, including all the countries in the world. They have an operation everywhere in the world. They're global players right now. In every segment, country that they go to, they ensure that in this space, they only serve the hotel and the restaurant business. And when they started off with that, then taking your question further, Soumya, they went deeper into that segment. Besides equipment, they got in the water conditioner, the detergent, the service that was required. So it became an entire ecosystem that they supported only that customers. And no matter how strong they became, they would not waver from that focus on segments and go to schools and companies and organizations, right? So the deep element of the strategy meant that they have 70% market share in their category and have great margin in the process. It's a great company, extremely, they don't really make a lot of noise, extremely profitable, extremely successful. So these are just three examples of how you can ensure that you can segment your market, segment your companies, segment your business opportunity, and go after that because you can serve them effectively. Now, if you've done this exercise first, now even when you have your business ideas and concepts, right, you will also face the same challenge. And Pooja is from Indore, is one of the companies that we are mentoring in the Nurture program, and she had exactly the same problem, right? That when she was selling, she had so many customer segments that she had sold her products to. And that's one of the first questions that we discussed. Okay, can you now segregate them? Can you identify what are your segments? And now start thinking. And then there are rules that you can really apply to really figure out which is a good segment to go after. I'll quickly tell you the 4 rules you could think about. Is it a large segment? Is it growing fast? Right? That's the first question. What is the competitive play in that segment? Second question you ask yourself. The third question you ask yourself is that can you offer a unique proposition to that customer in that segment? And the fourth thing, is it something that you can communicate easily or comfortably to the customer? If you are able to answer these 4 questions, then that's a great choice of a segment that you can do. So if you're faced with a problem saying, okay, I have 3 or 4 segments that I could be possibly going into, ask these 4 questions. And if you ask these 4 questions, you will get the answer as to which is the segment that you should go after. And when you start building the business model canvas, one of my recommendations to you in the beginning is to create the canvas for one segment at a time. So even if you land up getting 3 segments, just for example, do not try to put all the segments together at one shot. Create the canvas with one segment first, and then create another canvas with another segment, and then create a canvas with a third segment, but create independent canvases for each segment. And once you do that, then we can go to the next stage. But that's a very good way. Don't try to mix up segments because it confuses you the heck out of you by the time you need to build the other part of the canvas. So now that we are clear about which segment to do and you've chosen that one segment for which you will build the canvas, the second thing that you have to come about, that's also came up in one of the answers that I asked earlier, what's important, what's the starting point, is the value proposition. What is the value proposition that you are offering to your customers? And value proposition, when you talk about it, you could have innovative, or it could be a completely disrupting kind of an offer. It might be similar to other offers in the market, but will be with additional features or attributes. So when you're creating a value proposition, think about what is critical for that set of customers. And there is a tool and a technique that you can actually do to also do your value proposition or understand how to really generate a good value proposition. And that's an extension of the tool that you really have of the business model canvas, which is called the value proposition canvas. So in this, what you really do, and this is not really required as far as the TiE competition is concerned. So this is a little bit of back-end work. If you are struggling to create a value proposition, then this will help you do that. But is this required to be submitted? No. Okay, so what you require to submit is only the business model canvas. This is a little bit of back-end working if you struggle to be able to identify a good value proposition canvas. Now, what you really have in the value proposition canvas is at one end of it, what you have are basically the gains that the customer is looking for, the pains that the customer is experiencing, and the jobs that the customer wants to get done. So this is what you really list down. You think about your customer, you think like your customer and say that, okay, what are the gains this customer segment is looking at, what are the pains that they're experiencing, what are the customer jobs. And on the left side is where you create a value proposition in terms of what are the things that you do that are gain creators for this customer. What are the things that you do or your product does which are pain relievers for this customer? It relieves the pain that the customer is facing. And what are the products and services that you have that actually do the customer job that they are looking for? And you start now mapping this with each other. You write it down and then you say which of these connects to which of the pain reliever connects to the pain that the customer is facing. Which are the gain creators that you're doing that connects to the gain that the customer is looking for. So when you start listing this out and connecting the dots, and when you start looking at this, you might find that there are some pains that you don't relieve. There are some gains that maybe the customer is looking for which you don't do. But there's a lot of things that you do. Now, if you have a conversation with customers, you will be able to capture out of this what is a good value proposition canvas, because from here is when you will start creating your value proposition. And because you will create the right value proposition, you are able to use it subsequently in everything that you do now. Your value proposition is something that can use whether you do your branding, whether you do your website, it will be at the forefront of your story. If you do SEO, you really use that to drive traffic to you. Whether you do your content marketing, anything that you do, right? The hero of your story is your value proposition. And when you are talking that language to customers, that is the best way to attract that customer to be able to come to you. So this is the reason why clarity of the value proposition becomes so very important to you when you create your own business model. You get these two things right, the right customer segment and the appropriate value proposition for that customer segment. In my opinion, personal opinion, I mean others might have a different thought process, you've got 50% of the canvas right. Because this clarity ensures that the next 7 boxes become easier to now complete, because you know whom you're dealing with and you know what is the value that you're delivering to them. And then everything else becomes simpler now because you have this clarity in your mind. So let's take a look at the end of the day, what is the end goal that you want to achieve out of this? That end goal that you want to achieve out of this is to create that unique positioning for yourself. That unique positioning that in the sea of those gray balls that you see out there, that shiny blue sphere that you see stands out. And that's exactly the same way that your business, your offer, your product, your solution, your service will stand out when the customers see a sea of other me too similar products. They will see your solution, your service, your product standing out. And that is the reason they will be attracted to come to talk to you. This is where you start become a magnet for customers. You don't start needing to be hard selling yourself to customers. Customers come to you because they see the unique elements that you bring to the table. And that's exactly the end goal that all of us want to achieve in life, isn't it? And this is the reason why you start off with identifying your customers and identifying their value proposition. If you mix up your customers, you're going to get your value proposition wrong. If you identify the segment but you don't do the exercise to understand what are the pains, gains, you're not going to get the value right. So these are the two very, very important starting points. Now that you have the two most critical things covered, what do you go to next in the canvas? The third component that you do in the canvas is what we call channels. Now when you talk about channels are, it's all about, not just about how you serve your customer. Channels are how do you communicate what you have to your customers? How do you sell to your customers? What is the channel that you deliver value to your customers through? What are the channels through which you service your customers? All of these form elements of the channel. So this is something that you also focus upon and try to identify. When you have clarity about who your customer is and what your value proposition is, automatically you'll start thinking for this customer segment, this could be an appropriate channel, not the other one. If you have 3 or 4 segments mentioned there, then your channel get mixed up now because there are 3 or 4 different channels now. I see a question here from Pooja. For understanding pains and gains, do we need to take interviews of prospective customers or research and understanding? Well, two things, Pooja. If you've been in that segment, you start with an hypothesis. And yes, validate it with some customers. You don't have to go to hundreds and thousands of customers. But go and ask some customers, are these real pains for you? Are these real gains that you're looking at? Validate it. Ask them, what are the other pains that you feel? I mean, you might ask them, do you feel this A, B, C? Ask them, is there a third or a fourth or a fifth thing that you feel that maybe I don't know about? So it's a good way, because at any point of time, customer inputs and customer feedback is a critical thing for your business, right? And when you are doing the model, obviously it will be useful for you. So yes, please do it, but you don't have to do it for thousands and hundreds of customers. In my opinion, even if you go to 5, 10, 20 customers, I think that's even good enough, right? So at the end of the day, you can use the beauty of this is that as a business, the concept of the business model canvas is that innovation is not just required in terms of product, right? You can innovate on any of the elements of the business model canvas. Once you have your segment and value problem right, on each of the other 7 elements, now you can innovate, because you can innovate in terms of the channel through which you serve your customers. If you really look at the classic example in the older days, right, when computers were sold through dealers by geeks who had to come to you had to understand a lot of technology to do that. From there, Dell enters the market and starts selling computers directly to customers. And you sit at your home or your office, you call up Dell, you place an order, and the system, they deal with you, they answer your technical queries, they ship the system to you, right? They created an entirely new channel, they bypassed whatever channel, and they became wildly successful. They built in amazing margins through that. So this is an example of how a channel can be really leveraged and used. If you really look back at in the old telecom days in India, when telecom was launched, there was a requirement to a lot of the earlier times mobile telephony and connections were only sold through large retail stores that were created, or salespeople who went and met people. And then when prepaid services are launched, then it required really an FMCG, a fast moving consumer goods kind of a distribution. So you had to go and completely create a new channel. You had to go to what were distributors of soaps and toothpaste who had reach into the smallest of small merchant shops in the cities and towns in India, and then you have to get your product moving through them. So you have to have a completely new channel that you need to get your product out to the market. So it is all about how can you really leverage and build your channels that can really help you as it is, right? So once you get your clarity about what are the channels that you can possibly reach your customers, the fourth thing that you focus upon is what are the customer relationships that you really want to create. Now, customer relations of various kinds of times. You can be looking at questions that you can be asking yourself, right, when you're trying to build relationships. Are these unavoidable connects as it is? Does your solution help the customers to solve an unsolvable challenge? Are they underserved? Are they urgent? Are they unworkable, right? All of these things will help you to figure out what is the kind of customer relationship you might have. In some cases, you might have a low touch. That means the customer is only interacting with chatbots. On some other extent, where there is a lot more hand-holding required, you might have a concierge service kind of a customer service, where you have somebody personally talking one-on-one with customers and dealing with them. Depending upon what is the kind of product, what is the evolution, what is the kind of customer, what is the kind of margin that you have, you can also figure out what is the kind of customer relationship that you really want to create out of the process. And the last part, or the fifth part of the right side of the canvas, like we call it, are the revenue streams. What are the revenue streams that you can have in your business? Now, when you look at all of these parts of these 5 elements in the business model on the right side, I normally describe this like if you go to watch a play, right? Then as an audience, what you can see in the stage in front of you, that is what the business model canvas on the right is. This is all the things that is visible to your customers. And the left side of the canvas entirely, the other 4 boxes, are what is behind the scenes. So this is how you really demarcate the canvas. The right is in what is in front of the customer, and the left is what is behind the scenes. And what is in front of the customer is revenue. So obviously when you're talking about revenue, you could have revenue from various sources. In many businesses, right, you had software that was sold through boxes earlier. You had to buy, you had to pay money, buy software, it'll get installed in your office, and that is how it will work. And then suddenly the model changed, and software started being sold on a subscription basis. So you had software as a service. Now no longer you have to invest $100,000, $50,000 to buy a software. You could buy a software license and then operate it for 5 people, 50 people, 500 people, 5,000 people with a license fee, which is whatever, $50, $500, $5,000, whatever it was, and scalable upwards and downwards. So it made it convenient. Upgrades were easier. You didn't have to be worried about an outdated product. So it completely changed the entire business model because of the revenue streams that really got generated. In a lot of businesses, there are revenue streams that might be upfront in terms of the Gillette model, another classic model of a revenue stream, right? There at the upfront of it, you buy a razor, which it costs you X amount of money, but the blades that you buy later on, which is actually in terms of pricing, are much more expensive than the razor also, but you have no other choice now because that blade only fits that razor. You have no other choice. You have a long tail revenue now because once that razor is bought, the person is going to need shaving and you're going to see that again and again. So there are various kinds of revenue models that can really be created, and innovation can be created in a lot of businesses out of the revenue model that you can create. Because there you might have an existing customer segment which is same as a competitor. You might have similar value proposition, a lot of other things similar. Can you innovate in terms of the revenue model that you can create out of it? Can you create a new revenue model that can disrupt a current market entirety? And this is something that you wouldn't think about. So these are the first 5 boxes of the business model canvas. Now we come to the left side, the side which is hidden, the side which is not seen by the customer, but is critical for that plate to function. It is critical for the business to function. It is critical for you to deliver value to your customers. And what are those boxes? You start off with key resources. So this is where it starts. The business model canvas forces you to start thinking that for a business to deliver value to its customers, what are the key resources that you need to have? Now, when you talk about resources, resources could be physical resources, financial resources, intellectual resources, or human resources. You should have that clarity in your mind. If you're in an industry where patents are important, right? IP is important, then that's a very, very critical thing. If there are financial resources you require because of the nature of your business, you need to have clarity about that these are resources required early on in your business approach and early on in your business planning. You have to figure out how do you raise money, how do you ensure that you have the funds available. Otherwise, you're not able to really build something sustainable, right? It could be physical. If it's in manufacturing, if it's distribution, you need warehouses, you need whatever. So you need to be able to clarify and understand what are the resources that you really need that are critical for you to really build your business. And that is something that it forces you to list down first of all. So you have clarity in your mind that when I do this business, these are the resources which are critical. And if you cannot do that, then is that the right business model? That's the question that maybe you'll need to come to later on then. Once you've done these 6 blocks, now you come to the 7th block. The 7th block really talks about what are the key activities that are required to be done by you. In key activity to be done by you as a business to deliver value to your customers. Now, key activities can actually differ from different businesses. If you really look at this example right now, right? If you look at a company like Microsoft, for a company like Microsoft, software development is a key activity for them. Now, when you come to a company like Dell, which is a computer company, one would assume that manufacturing computers, right, or something like that should have been a key activity for them. No. The key activity for Dell actually is supply chain management. In fact, the entire business model of Dell is actually built upon the cash flow model where they are able to collect money even before they build the machine, right? So as a customer, you land up buying a computer from Dell, you pay them in advance. After that, the order goes to the factory and then the order is placed for the raw material. The raw materials are delivered, the system is assembled, the system is shipped to you, and then you receive the delivery, and after a certain point the vendors are paid. So the cash flow cycle for Dell is actually they receive the money upfront and then they supply it to you. So it's all for them is the supply chain management. How can they integrate their vendors? How can they integrate the ordering systems? How can they ensure that all the orders coming to there are channelized to a factory where it is going to build? How do all the vendors get advance notification of what to be stocked? Stuff like that. So the entire business model is built upon a very, very strong supply chain management. Now it's a key activity for them as compared to a conventional logic where we would say manufacturing computers, not necessary. The same way for a consulting company in McKinsey, a key activity is problem solving, right? So this is what, as in business, as an organization, you need to be clear in your mind. What are the key activities which are important for me to deliver value to my customers? So this is something that you should be able to have clarity upon. Then after that, you come to something which is, what are the key partners? Now, no matter what you do as an organization, it's impossible that you'll be able to do everything on your own. It's a smart move to be able to figure out who are the key partners who can help you to build that business and to deliver value to customers. Why would you need to invest to do everything on your own? Maybe you are manufacturing something. A logistics partner will help you to get it to where you want to have your customers. In the same way, like when you have a great e-commerce business, delivery, or the companies like delivery or some of the other supply chain companies are the ones that really support all the e-commerce companies, right? So who are your partners today? If you really look at it, Amazon or AWS is a key partner that could have for a lot of software that you really create, because now you don't have to invest into servers and everything else to do. You can have a partnership as with AWS and ensure that you have capacity on demand. You can scale up, you can scale down, you have sudden surges, you are able to take it up, right? So it becomes a key partner. It's important for you to figure out who are the key partners who are important for your business, and that becomes the eighth part of the canvas. And what you really look at within that as it is, are you able to optimize? Can you form alliances that can optimize? A lot of things you can do on your own also, but can you optimize your business model? You're able to reduce the risk, as well as you're able to acquire resources without really that cost that really comes with it. So this is the beauty and this is the advantage of being able to utilize partnerships, and that is what you should really understand. And the last part to your business model canvas is the cost structure. So you really start looking at critically what are the elements that contribute to your cost, just like your revenues. Then you start thinking, what are the cost elements to my business? What really forms it? How does it come across? So this really becomes, these 9 boxes put together form what is known at the conceptual level as the key business model canvas. Now we've listed all 9 of them. I've run them through all of them quickly to give you an understanding of what they are. Now when you visually look it out, okay, I have a question out to how to figure out the key partners and agrees them upon a business model canvas. Well, you don't have to agree them upon your business model canvas. You have to identify who your key partners are, who our key partners are likely to be, and then figure out what is the way that you can partner with them. What is the way that you can set up an agreement? Like I said, AWS, right? It doesn't really require anything that you really require to be able to get them to agree, right? You figure out that AWS is a very critical partner to your business organization requirement. They have models that suit every kind of business that you can go to. So it's not necessary when you say partnering, everything doesn't require only a joint venture or something like that, right? There are many other ways that you can really look at partnerships also beyond that. I hope, Ali, I am able to answer that question. Okay. What's missing for me is the business corner, the cost of natural capital, hence sustainability of the business beyond financial sense. What's missing for me is the cost of natural capital beyond financial sense. I think Suhas, I'll have to understand your question slightly more detail with a context to it. It will help me as we
Yeah,
go along. Let me, yeah.
yeah, Ajay, this is Suhas. I think what I have observed is most of the businesses are focused only on financial metrics.
Uh-huh.
And when you look at the cost elements, none of the businesses force you to think about the cost of natural capital which you're deploying in your business, because that has implication on sustainability of not only your business but sustainability of this planet. So I
Wonderful.
think those two elements are just missing in business canvas, and I've
I
been.
agree. So there is one element of the business model canvas I'll point out to, maybe that covers it. Plus some of these kind of questions. What we can do is, once I finish this session, we'll anyway have a Q&A time, which some of these things will answer. So I'll park your questions to us, and we'll take it up, and some of the other people also in this group will also contribute towards helping you to get to an answer for this. Is that fine?
Perfect.
Understood. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I see a question out here also. Any pointers on how to establish, continuously promote, and achieve active channel partner network? Usually channel dormant after some time for us. Fine. So again, Pooja, this is a little bit specific to your business and all that. We can take that question in the Q&A section when you have time, rather than take everybody's time out here. I hope you're fine with that, Pooja. Okay. So I'll just cover, because we have a couple of slides more to go, and after that we can get into the Q&A. So this is where you see the 9 elements of the business model canvas. Now if you remove all the outer elements that you see, those are the core element that you do. Now if you remove the names also, and you now start creating a grid around it, basically this is where you start seeing the business model canvas being generated. And ultimately, if you now remove the visuals also, this is the canvas overlay, and this is what in actual sense is the business model canvas. I promise you at the beginning of the meeting that I'll show you the business model canvas at the end. So this is what the business model canvas is. A technique or a tool to work upon the business model canvas is, this is available online. You can download this as a large PDF file. The way to work upon a business model canvas, let me tell you friends also, you take a large A0 kind of print for this, a massive large print, put it up in one of the office walls of yours as it is, put up the entire sheet of this canvas on the wall, and then basically use post-it notes that you can put in what your inputs are for these elements. So if you're writing customer segment, customer relationship, channels, in a particular segment, suppose for one segment you've taken the color blue for your post-it note, then ensure that you're putting up channels, customer relation, everything in a blue post-it colors. Your second segment, you picked pink as a color, so put all the other elements in pink color. So basically what you do is, you use, first of all, stick it up, and then after that what you do is use post-it notes. Now the reason why this is, that is a visual tool. First of all, you are able to look at it in one shot. The second, that it starts giving you a flexibility, that if you want to change something, if you want to remove something, if you want to modify it, it's easier to do. You not put it down onto the sheet itself. The post-it it gives you a lot of mental flexibility, really speaking, thinking that hey, you can change it. There's nothing sacrosanct about what was put down once. It's an iterative model that you can do again and again and again. And the beauty of the canvas is that you can actually start saying that hey, if I change this, how does it change the rest of the model? If I change this segment, what changes? If I change this element of a channel, what changes? You're actually able to start seeing linkages between one thing and the other thing. And you are able to now start becoming more creative and innovative about what might emerge as an overall solution. So the beauty of the canvas, it frees you up. You are not committed to something that you put down. It gives you a lot more mental flexibility. It gives you a lot more mental agility. Okay. So one of the things that I told Suhas and some of the other people I told earlier is, outside the business model canvas also, there are 4 elements that I really looked at. And this is really speaking the key trends, the market forces, the macroeconomic forces, and the industry forces. Suhas, typically speaking, when you talked about typically societal cultural trends, that's one of the key trends from a natural impact point of view, maybe, but some of these elements can be brought in from your thought process point of view. So you can incorporate the thinking that you say is what is the impact on ecology, or what's the impact on the, you can really bring it into the factors that are outside the business model canvas. Now mind you, for the business plan competition, you don't have to focus on these right now, but what I'm only trying to tell you is that the model has the ability to ensure that it factors this elements also into your thought process. That's the reason why all of these are also available to you to be able to think about when you are building your canvas. Okay, so with that we have come to an end. This has been slightly longer than what I had envisaged and anticipated. I've taken about 50 odd minutes to do that, but that still leaves us with time for Q&A. There are questions that some of the people have asked, and there can be additional questions that please feel free to do. I'm very happy to have shared this conceptual framework with you. Do read the book. You'll gain so much more knowledge. It doesn't matter what happens in the competition. One thing I can guarantee you, that this is a model that will serve you through your journey in entrepreneurship and help you. In fact, the business model canvas is used in large corporates also when they launch new products and new businesses, because it actually helps them to be able to think out of the box, right? Because now you don't have one box, you have 9 boxes. So you really are able to think out of the box, and that is why the creativity as well as the innovation is so much more better. So I'm going to stop sharing my presentation so that we can move into a Q&A session, and then we can talk. Okay, so I see a question out here. George says, and Suhas, I'm not going to ignore your question. I'll still come back to that. Let me look at some of the other questions that are there. How do you manage many partners, each taking some of your margin and the admin cost for partner management? Doesn't it make sense not having less partners if possible? Yeah, so George, I think it ultimately boils down to when you say really margin. See, there is a cost to doing business in everything. There is a cost to you for raw material. It doesn't mean that you don't do raw material, right? The same way, if you have a partner, there will be a cost to it. Are you able to build a logical business model with all the costs that you really put together? Now, if there are critical things for you, now it's not necessarily everything critical in your business is only done by you. You can have actually partners who can do it at much more cost effective way as compared to you. You might actually not really have the economies of scale or the benefits that a partner who might have much larger volume or something might have. I think it's for you to really figure out what makes economic sense and what makes business sense, whether working with a partner or working yourself. If you define your key activities and you define your key partners, you might find some of your key activities you might be better off doing it, some of it you might be actually giving to your partners. So I think it will come from that point of view. Okay, there's one small point that I want to leave for all of you all. There is also a feedback form that you see in the chat message right now. I'll definitely love that you all fill up the feedback form before you leave the meeting, and we are still obviously going to continue in terms of answering some of the questions. I see Fatima with a question. While doing discovery, what is the best way to keep your customer segment specific and actionable on your canvas? So, in my opinion, Fatima, you start off with listing down what are all the possible customer segments that you have. So, you might start, like I said, grouping with common needs, all of those elements, and you start identifying and putting them down. And then you start rating them in terms of the attractiveness, right? And I gave you those four questions that you can possibly use to be able to figure out which is more attractive to you, what is the size and the rate of growth of that segment, what is the competitive play in that segment, do you have a unique proposition for that segment, and can you communicate it? If you are able to answer those questions, you are able to rate the attractiveness segment for you, and then you have to validate what is your value proposition in that segment by talking, and that is where customer discovery will help you. Now you might do it for the top two or three segments, you might not do it for the seventh and eighth segment because you might not even get there, and through this process you'll be able to figure out which segment to really go after. I hope that answers the question for you, Fatima. Okay. In the interest of the fact that Suhas put this question earlier before others, I still want to answer the question. Suhas, can you go back and now articulate your question again, and then we'll take some of the other questions.
Yeah, Ajay. I mean, I'm a mentor here at TiE Tampa. I teach also entrepreneurship, and there are
Wonderful.
two aspects I try to focus on with the entrepreneurs. First is when you talked about value proposition, I try to make sure they understand the value proposition needs to be have a big purpose or true purpose behind it.
True.
Because if you just create a value proposition based on I'm going to be softer, stronger, faster, that business is not going to be sustainable. Somebody else will come back and do it faster, softer, stronger than you three years down the road.
Right.
So always concentrate on your bigger purpose.
I
And
agree.
then I try to tell them on the uh, we all take for granted, like, yes, everybody uses, let's say you're using uh, water in your process. You can put in what you pay to the municipal corporation, but reality is that's not the cost of the water.
True.
None of us really look into what's the cost of carbon, what we are emitting. We
Right.
never put that into our cost resources
Valid point.
model,
Valid point.
because if you don't do those things in a long term, yeah, you may be successful in 3 5 years, but if you want to be around for 50 100 years, you need to think about natural capital, figure it out what's the true cost of natural capital is, incorporate that into your P&L. So that's what I was suggesting. So
I agree. I agree. So those are wonderful thoughts, and I completely concur with you that a lot of times in business we ignore the cost that you're really pointing about that will impact and leave a much bigger effect. You might be profitable, you might be successful, yes. So yeah, I think that's a great point that you brought in, and yeah, as mentors and as people who are wanting to form businesses, I think it's an important element. You might not factor it from a financial model point of view, but being mindful of it and being capturing this information even if in a non-financial way, I think is a great starting point. Yeah, so you can capture it definitely in costs, in terms of your business, as well as in terms of what could be the potential impact. And uh, possibly, like you rightly said, Suhas, maybe you are committed to it, your customer segments are committed to it, maybe you are selling to that kind of a customer segment. You might actually create a unique value proposition that you are focused on what is it going to make a difference to the environment, and that's your bigger mission in your business as compared to just about whatever else you're doing right now. So I love the thought that you shared. Thank you for that.
Thank you,
Ajay, can I
Ajay. Thank
ask
you
a
for
question?
great presentation.
Thank you, Suhas. Yeah,
Can
sure.
I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah. So, Ajay, it comes to the first 15 minutes of your presentation. Who is the real user of BMC? Is it us, so that we know what we are doing and what is changing, or is it an investor, or who really asks for it?
Okay, so in my opinion, the real consumer of the BMC is you, right? The person who's founding the business. Because I have found that this helps the founders to have so much more clarity about their business concepts. In fact, it helps to clear a lot of cobwebs. It ensures clarity, it ensures focus. So that's the starting point. A lot of
And in addition,
investors, so let
addition
me
to,
let
yeah.
me just finish. A lot of investors will ask you for your business model canvas because they would like to understand, do you have clarity? And this becomes the shortest way for them to take a look at, to understand your thought process about your business, right? And somebody had asked me this question yesterday: is a business model canvas a business plan? It's not entirely a business plan, but it's a great overview. So
Mhm.
the real user of this is you as a business founder, and other people will use it to evaluate your clarity and your focus. Yeah, you have a
Okay.
follow-on question.
Yes, yes. The follow-up question was, is it something which one should try to like, I will not use the word secret, but I'm getting into that direction. Is that something which you have to prevent from getting leaked, or kind of that thought process? Is it something which can be very easily public but doesn't matter?
So I will not necessarily say that you put it out on social media, but I
No,
would
of course
definitely
not.
say that it's a great way to ensure that within your teams. In fact, I find a business model canvas a great way when you hire people to help them to understand what is it that you do, why you do, how you do. It is the
Mm-hmm.
fastest way that you can get it aligned, right, people? So not only that, when you have sales and marketing folks, when you have a clarity on your customer segment, when you're talking about a value proposition, when you're talking about channels, now they have clarity what they're supposed to do. The rest of your organization, maybe it is finance, maybe it is every the beauty of the model is it helps them to understand, helps everybody to understand what are the critical activities, so it brings people on the same page in the fastest possible way. So because of which you should use it extensively internally, definitely. Externally, I'm not saying put it out on social media, but yeah, you can talk about it to your investors, you can talk about it to potentially partners that you want to work with. But yeah, I'm not saying put it out. So maybe that would be my answer to it, right? That use
Yeah,
it
got it.
effectively, but it would definitely help you in the process.
I think the word extensively internally answered the question.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Wow. Wonderful. I see some other questions out here from Samya that says, at early traction, when you prioritize selling experience to your customers to build trust, how do you justify not so aggressive top line numbers to your investors? Uh,
Soumya, you had your hands raised. Why don't you explain that question, because that question sounds a little long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Ajay, for those very interesting thoughts. So, just wanted to understand that we're in, especially because when you're in healthcare, you want to sell an experience to your customer, but that does not necessarily point out to very aggressive top line numbers, right? So, how do you justify? Because it's a long game that you're playing, and selling that experience and building that trust, especially in healthcare, health tech, is extremely important. As a founder, it's extremely important for me. So, initially, you may not have those aggressive numbers in your top line in your business model. How do you actually justify that to your investors? And yeah.
So I'll answer that quick question, but I'll also have some of the other people because I see a lot of experienced other TiE charter members here. My quick answer to your question is two things. One is, who are the investors that you're really talking to and what are they looking for? Because it's not that every investor is only looking for large numbers. Your investors are also looking for clarity. See, you are having a product that you sell to many different varied uses, which is not necessarily in the longer run scalable. Is that a great top line? Not necessarily. As compared to you focus on a certain segment and you make decent headway in terms of being able to say that, hey, this is a great solution for this segment, for this problem, and a lot of people in this space really find it acceptable, and you are able to show penetration in terms of depth, if not quantum, I'm sure that the investors would still walk away impressed, right? And that's my opinion. But I love to have. I see Joyce is here. Suhas is also a mentor. Craig is here. So I would love for some of them to share that on. Lay is here. So any of you want to share your thoughts?
Hi, Ajay sir. I'm Anand here.
Yeah, Anand.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up question on Soumya's point. So just wanted to understand if we are being too specific into the target audience, and if we are saying to our investors that okay, this is the particular segment for which we are targeting the we are solving the problem for, will it not make my total addressable market shrinking in that sense,
Well, my point is that whatever segment that you choose to go after, as long as it's a large enough addressable market, is good enough. I never advocate that you choose a very, very small addressable market. That's point A. Point B, that is, please keep in mind that in the end of the day, like I said even yesterday, can you be a large frog in a small pond rather than being a small or a large fish in a small pond, rather than being such a small fish in an ocean that you are not even counted? My logic to you is, as a startup, as a business, if you are able to become the large fish in a small pond, for you can jump ponds later on and go to a bigger pond. It's easier. Unlike fish who can't do that, as a startup business you can still do that, and that will be much more easier because financially, from all other ways, you'll be much stronger and much more bigger, and that growth will happen faster when you focus on a segment and serve it effectively well. That is the logic that makes great sense. Like I said again, you try to be everything to everybody or nothing to nobody. So even if you are talking about, I have a huge market, but nobody is really interested in, and it's a hard sell for you, it's an uphill battle for you to gain customers, what is the use? And just because you define, I have a total addressable market of, $100 million, billion dollars, right? As compared to that, you are able to say I have an addressable market of $10 billion, but I am able to serve them very effectively and I can do that. What's a better situation to be in?
I think I agree
totally makes
with
sense. Yeah.
I agree with what Ajay said, because you need early adopters in your business. Think of it how Amazon has scaled. Amazon started selling only books.
Books, that's right.
They were not selling anything. They were focused only on books. You can move, as Ajay said, from this pond to another pond later. Once you have early adopter advantage, you learn what's required. So I think it's critical that you keep your focus narrow upfront, because there you will be able to master what you are offering to your client.
Yeah.
And maybe I would like to add to that, Anand, as well. This is from my experience of working with startups. My job is to build presentations, right? Most of the time when they go to investors for pitching, one of the key slides where they get stuck or they get hammered is usually this market size thing, because somewhere subconsciously a lot of us want to kind of show big market and big volumes and big potential, and then when the investor actually starts grilling you, you know that your numbers don't match. So it is okay to have smaller numbers. I know of companies which have only 2 employees who are making multi-billion-dollar turnovers with just 3 or 4 customers as well. So if you can kind of narrow down on that something can give you good revenue. The large numbers don't really matter. If that was kind of the reason why you asked that question, Anand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
AJ, could I make a comment on that?
Yeah, please,
Yes,
Joyce,
yes.
please.
I'm just sort of responding to the personal nature I feel was in the question, which I think that someone who's really into healthcare, you're going to feel a natural conflict when you're talking to investors. You're going to feel very pushed by this whole process to be more aggressive about numbers than you may feel comfortable about. And I think the thing to do is to go ahead and face that and figure out, how am I going to present this so it makes sense to the investor without it feeling like I've given up the mission of my business. And that kind of real issue can really drive a great presentation. So good luck with it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you.
Soumya, you're on mute if you're asking a question.
I was just thanking Joyce for that perspective. So Thank you.
Any other questions, either related to what Ajay spoke today, anything else relating to your entrepreneurial journey, or anything relating to the competition as well? We are here for a few more minutes, so you could ask us those questions.
I got a quick question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Leila. Cool. Okay, Pooja, let's go with you.
So any pointers on how to establish and continuously promote and achieve an active channel partner network? Because we've seen that initially the channel partner takes it up very seriously, but as time goes on, it goes more in a dormant mode. So any pointers and best practices around it?
Okay.
So I'll give
Ajay, I would like to take this question first,
Okay,
because
go
my
ahead.
whole career has been managing channels. Okay, so I spent 10 years building channels and managing channels for Shell and ExxonMobil. I think there's only one word, Pooja. It's a difficult word. It's called relationships. Okay, absolutely nothing else works with channels. You have to constantly build relationships, and you have to nurture those relationships. It's like a love affair, right? You can't have a boyfriend and then after 4 days you ignore them and then they lose interest. The relationship has to constantly be fueled. Same thing with channels. You have to constantly keep in touch with them. I would even go to a tactical step saying attend their family functions, their weddings, their birthdays or whatever. Keep in contact, keep conversing with them, because a lot of times, like human relationships, there are things that they don't tell you which are hurting them. And then there's a lot of friction between the channel and the primary or the principal. So I would say just one word: relationships. Yeah. So yes, Ajay.
I'll add to that, Pooja, the same way like you rightly said. See, the interesting part is when you talk about you call them channel partners, but at the end of the day, you're only looking at transactional relationships. You have to add value in so many other ways that you can possibly, right? And that is where really the relationships get built, because you add value to each other. So I think if the focus of you as a principal is in terms of how can I add value to them, how can help them grow, then automatically their interest and their reciprocation of your inputs will result in you getting it also. It's only when it becomes a transactional thing. I expected you to do this, you didn't do it. Now I'm not going to do this. Obviously, it's going to fade away, right? So I think when you call it a relationship, partnership, then you have to work upon it like a partnership, not like a transactional activity.
Yeah, thank you. And any pointers on like how to form an effective, probably the protocols, maybe an agreement should be in place. What else? Some quarterly assessments or plan should be there mutually.
Well, depends upon the depth of your relationship. It's okay to ensure that you set up a common roadmap and you review it, right? It's good to figure out how things are moving. Uh, Whether a document and all, maybe it depends upon the legal nature of the country that you are in, what it requires and what. In some countries might require you to ensure that you have a legal document in place. In other countries it might be different, but whatever is the legality of it, or a documentation might be driven by something else. But it's important to have a clarity about what is the expectation from the relationship. What do you expect the partner to? What are the things that are expected from them? And sometimes, if you do not have the right expectation also, things can go wrong. Those are my quick inputs. Anybody else wants to add?
Leland, can I move on to Leland's question for a minute, and then we come back?
Yeah, I see a
And
couple of
Pooja, I see that your name has Pune, so Ajay is from Pune. He can be your mentor as well. And I think this question that you asked requires more of a conversation, a longer conversation. Leland, all yours.
Yeah. So I just had a question in terms of, I guess my question is, in your estimation, like what value is there when talking to investors, having not just a sort of theoretical idea of who your customer is, but having like, do you want a market research like number of this is how many customers there are? Like part of what we do is marketing services, right? Do I want to say, based on this segment of who we are trying to serve, this is how many people there are within that market? Of course, it's very difficult to get an exact number on that, but do you want some estimation of what that looks like? Because I mean, in my head, I'm thinking it's one thing to have like, oh, this is our customer. They have this kind of structure. They want these kind of things done. But do you want, this is, within a certain locality, how many of these firms that we're trying to serve in this area that we can, that we can actually do business with theoretically.
So, Leland, my answer to your question is that as an entrepreneur, you need to at least understand the size of your market. You're right, you might not have exact statistical data, even if you have good approximations and derivations from some other data points. It's a good starting point because I think that's an expectation most investors will have from a company, that if you're intending to serve a market, you should have a perspective about the size, the scale, the growth, competition. I think these are basic expectations. It's like hygiene, right?
Right.
That one would expect to have. So I think
Right.
that's my quick answer. And I mean, Joyce, you want to add anything more to that?
Yes, maybe you can tell from my face I'm thinking about something. Based here from what I've seen in Atlanta, there's certain universities that really seem to have helped the students figure out how to get, say if you have an app, to have initial users. And whenever you have a student like that who's beginning to talk about this, these are the trends we're seeing with our actual users right now, the judges sit up. There's just something natural about it that's just business-like. On the other hand, you may not have time for that in this round, but it's a great question. It's a great thing to be thinking about. I coached a team that was in a existing business, minority business competition, and had a unique customer base, and they knew a lot about it, and they struggled the whole time trying to explain that to the judges. But I think it proved they were real. And I think that's what I wanted to say about the university students who have done the users on an app, and they're tracking. Unfortunately, I saw one and they lost all their users. They ended up pulling out. But you need to know that.
Right. Okay.
Great question.
To add to that, there are two parts to what you asked as well. I don't know whether you know the military saying that no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So in sales as well, you can have numbers, like you said, very specific numbers as well, but maybe that guy will not end up buying from you at all. So those numbers, you will have to take them with a pinch of salt. Also, when you're talking from the perspective of the competition, I think the judges will try to look at whether have you thought through your customers rather than the numbers. So maybe instead of 100, you say 50. I'm not going to ask you or argue with you about the 50 and the 100, but I'm going to argue about how did you arrive at that number, or how did you realize that this person or this company or this user is going to be my customer. I think that's what you really need to focus on, the logic. And that's where the business model canvas doesn't, if you look at it, it doesn't talk about numbers anywhere. It's the contextual thinking that it's trying to provoke in you to say that, hey, this is the logic behind which I took the decision, or I'm talking about it.
Okay, thank you.
Ajay, if you could answer Bharat's question from the chat, it would answer mine as well.
Okay, so Bharat's question is that clarity on creating the business model canvas when your business is on an ideation stage. So, Bharat, my answer to your question is two ways. If you're not clear about what is the product or service that you're wanting to give, then you start off with the lean canvas, which is a predecessor. It was created after the business model canvas, but it's actually something that in process precedes the business model canvas. Start with the lean canvas. The lean canvas basically helps you figure out what is the problem that you are solving and how you're doing it innovatively, and then come to the business model canvas. But absolutely yes, it's something that you can use even in an ideation stage. In fact, the beauty of the business model canvas is you are actually it's like you're creating a virtual reality of business, which you are able to play around with and tinker around with to figure out, if I change this, what happens, if I change that, what happens. So absolutely yes, at an ideation stage. If you are not at all clear in terms of what you want to do, then possibly the lean canvas. And here are you showing the lean canvas? Or yeah, there it is. That is being displayed right now on the screen. That is the lean canvas, is a good way to start also. So that answers Bharat's question. There's also a question for Rajesh Chajed. Is there any best method to validate BMC? Absolutely, the best method to validate a BMC is validate with customers. Go and ask customers in that segment, right? Is this a value proposition that makes sense to you? Right? Like we discussed, are these channels, so go and validate. In fact, the beauty of this is because you have a clarity in your mind, you are able to go and ask this to customers. If you did not have clarity, then you are not able to validate this. So the best way to validate, talk to customers. That is a beautiful. In fact, if you look at the website of Strategizer, there are a series of small YouTube videos. In fact, they actually give you a small video case study in terms of two friends who are trying to start a travel agency, and how do they really go through the process using the canvas, how do they keep validating it, refining it, and how does that idea ultimately morph into a different concept from where they started off with. So it's a great way it explains, and obviously there is a linkage to customers there, and that is why that connect to customers is very, very important in the process. I hope, Bharat, that
Can you
answers
give the reference
your
for that
question
link
also.
there?
Sorry, Bharat, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much. I just want the book name which you mentioned at the start. I was
Business
dropped off
model.
because of some internet issues.
The name of the book is Business Model Generation. I'll type it out in the chat.
Also, this case study for the YouTube link for the travel, if possible. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. That is. Please ignore that book. That is not the name of the book. I made a mistake. Business Model Generation is the name of the book.
Okay.
I speak on behalf of Jeff Bezos. Amazon has good bundles of the business model canvas, the business model generation, and the value proposition generation as well as a good bundle. So it's a good offer to buy that book. Yeah. Disclosure: nothing. I know I have nothing to do with Bezos. Not yet.
Yeah, and I put down the website also, strategizer.com.
Any more questions? If you have not yet done, if you could just take a few minutes to give feedback on the workshop, it will help the team to understand you better and your needs better and kind of solve it as we go along. Couple of points from the from the competition perspective. In case your chapter has not yet reached out to you, please send them a mail. You would have got a copied email when you got the registration done. So please do reach out to them so that they can help you with it. Certain of the things that we spoke about in terms of the competition are very chapter specific. So the BMC may be applicable for my city in Coimbatore. It may not be applicable for, let's say, Pune or whatever. So please find out from your local chapter what the exact rules and the needs of the competition are. You would already have got a mail to resubmit your pitch deck and video. Or if you want to, of course, it's an optional thing. If you want to update it and resubmit it, you can go ahead and do it. The URL for that is bit.ly/TiE revise. bit.ly/TiE revise. Let me type it out here as well. So if there are no more questions, let me stop recording.